Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Good morning and welcome to you all. I'm Sally Dunn, a co-member of the Loretto community and a member of Loretto's Latin American Caribbean Committee, better known as LACC. I am also Loretto's former UN representative, so I'm really very pleased to be a part of this year's Commission on the Status of Women and to facilitate this event, which is titled Immigration Spotlight, Humanitarian Crises at the US-Mexico Border. Note that the title says crises, plural, to reflect the fact that there are multiple unique humanitarian crises all along the 2,000+ mile border from Texas to California. The stories we will hear today are representative of conditions all along this border. During this session, we will explore the human impacts of the broken US immigration system. By way of background, the LACC has been holding Immigration Spotlight virtual sessions for the last 2 years, usually twice a month. When COVID shut everything down, LACC was unable to continue our commitment to accompany migrants and refugees seeking asylum in the US. We had to suspend our border immersion trips to the Arizona-Mexico border region just when we were hoping to expand to Tijuana and elsewhere. So we continued to foster relationships with new and existing partners along the border, seeking ways to support their work. In addition to financial support, we give these partners a platform to describe the devastating impacts of the ever worsening US immigration policies coming out of the former US administration. Today, you will hear from some of these partners. Please join our LACC listserv if you want to get notice of future immigration spotlights, and you can get in touch with me or anyone else within Loretto for that. LACC's co-sponsors for today's event are Loretto at the UN and JCOR, Justice Coalition of Religious. Jax Wiedeschnick is Loretto's volunteer serving as the Loretto at the UN intern this year. And Teresa Blumenstein, former Loretto at the UN intern, and now the New York coordinator of JCOR, are with us today and will each say a few words of welcome. And I will say that I haven't seen Teresa yet join, and if she doesn't, then Jax, I'm sure that you can tell us a little bit about JCOR as well.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Jax and I am the Loretto volunteer here based at Loretto at the UN, and we have had an exciting last 2 weeks and we're really excited to be helping LACC with this event. You probably have seen emails from me talking about the Commission on the Status of Women, and it essentially is a 2-week conference happening both within the UN and among civil society organizations like Loretto. And this year's priority theme is on the intersections of gender and climate change and natural disasters. And our review theme is on women and work, but of course there are so many intersections with that, including migration and especially climate-induced migration. So we are really happy to be hosting LACC on our virtual exhibit booth. I don't really see Teresa here, so I'll talk a little bit. JCOR, our co-sponsor for our virtual exhibit booth. Justice Coalition of Religious is an international global group of religious Catholic-based NGOs that does advocacy work at the UN. And they've been our partner with a virtual exhibit booth and have been hosting a lot of great events as well, and a lot of space for time of reflection and prayer. We even have a lot of Loretto roots in JCOR, so we're really excited to be partnering with them. And we became an official member of JCOR just this last year in time for our 30th anniversary of Loretto at the UN. So be sure to check out our virtual exhibit booth, and I'll put a link in the chat at the NGO CSW forum, which is the civil society part of this event. We will be having having a fireside chat with the Akshar Foundation, a school in India, tomorrow morning, and another fireside chat with the Angel Band Project tomorrow evening. And JCOR will be hosting another reflection time both tomorrow, this evening as well, and on Friday. So I'll put all of that information in the chat, and we're so excited to be here and be a part of LACC's work.
All right. Thank you, Jax. So before we get started, 3 quick reminders. Please remember to mute yourself if you're not speaking, and you might want to turn off your video as well. And we want you all to know that this session is being recorded. So I now have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker. Our first speaker will be Dora Rodriguez. Dora is an advocate and activist for migrants' rights. Dora is herself a survivor of the 1980 tragedy that took place in the Organ Pipe National Monument, Arizona, where a group of Salvadorians who had fled civil war in their home country of El Salvador, and this tragedy resulted in 13 deaths, including 3 minors. This led to Dora being one of the first people that the sanctuary movement in Tucson, Arizona assisted. Dora's personal mission is to bring awareness to our communities about the truth of the brutal desert and what migrants face. Through the telling of her own journey, as well as her day-to-day experiences while volunteering at the Southwest border towns, Dora sheds light on current immigration issues and the realities of what is happening. Dora currently resides in Tucson, Arizona with her husband and is a mother of 5 children, and she has 3 grandchildren. Today, she is the director of the nonprofit organization Salvavision, an organization that provides aid and support to migrants and those who have been deported. Dora, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. How many minutes I have?
10 or 12 minutes, whatever, but take whatever you need.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sally. I will ask if it's possible for a moment of silence before I begin, and to honor our brothers and sisters who had died in the desert, in the rivers and the mountains, trying to seek safety to get to this country, and also to honor all our asylum seekers waiting in our border towns. If you can please join me for a minute. Thank you so much. This is very important for us, and I am so thankful for this space to tell not only my story, but the story of so many, and bring their voices to the world of what is happening in our border towns. We, in the town of Tucson, Arizona, are surrounded by four ports of entry. And for that, we are surrounded for 4 areas where our people cross and cross those deserts, where the temperature during the heat can rise to 115 degrees or more. And when it's cold, it is very, very cold, down to the 20s in our area. So we have seen so much agony and death around our areas. And for us that live around there, it's hard to even enjoy the beautiful sunsets or a day where it's a beautiful snow in the desert, because we know our people is there and we know the people is dying. Just last year alone, we had 226 people that were found. The remains were found, but we are sure there is more that we couldn't have found. So the fight for us continues, and I always really, when I get this space, want to emphasize the fact that Title 42 continues, and 40, I'm sorry, Title 42 is a provision, it's a public health law, but it's being used.
42 people on.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
There you are. You're
I
back.
hope this world zooming, but we're here, so that is what it matters. So I was just sharing, that the really struggles that we're seeing in our borders with Title 42 and when it was implemented as soon as the pandemic hit. And as we all know, people tell me, so what is Title 42? I said it's a provision of a public health law. It's being used to immediately expel asylum seekers. It really violates the legal of human rights to seek asylum. So it has nothing to do with immigration. And, public health experts have reacted to this, and they have said there is no need to continue with this, or it was never a need to have it. But due to that, we saw a larger need in our borders to provide aid and humanitarian aid to our brothers and sisters that have been expelled immediately when they are apprehended in our borders. And to put a picture to you, our people has been sent back to remote border towns where there's sometimes no services, none. And they are going back with no shoelaces, no belts, many times with their belonging in trash bags. And we are talking at any time of night, date, it doesn't matter what the weather is. So I'm going to share a little bit of how we have responded to this need in with Salvavision, with my organization, and not only my organization, but all of us around the Arizona region, which is Tucson Samaritans, and we have Bob that he's going to share with us too. And we also are partner sisters with Humane Borders, No More Death, and a larger other organizations who we saw a need. And what we did is in 2021, in 2020 in September, I went for a visit to a town called Sasabe, Sonora, which is about an hour and a half west of Tucson, Arizona. And pretty much nobody knows about Sasabe, Sonora. It's a very remote little place. The local people is only 2,500. But this area has no transportation. It has no public transportation, not public hospital, no shelters. It has nothing for our migrants. So Border Patrol decided when Title 42 came alive to practice this criminal act and to send our people to this remote area with nothing. So, but we're talking, when we say crisis, this is the crisis that we saw in this small town where 150 people a day was being sent back to that area every single day. So we visited, we saw the need, we act on it, and we, 5 women together, it's great. We got together, brought it to the States, talk about how we could help, and start bringing 700 bags of food a week to that town in order to give our migrants, our asylum seekers, something after they were expelled. And we are talking, most of our people, when they are apprehended in those areas, they have already been lost 5 to 6, 10 days in the desert. We see large number of indigenous from Guatemala, women with their children. Up to today, they're being apprehended and sent back. A women, that breaks my heart. It really, touched me because she came back after walking 12 hours in that desert with her 3-month-old baby back in her back. You know how beautiful they wrap their babies in this colorful, beautiful wrap in her back, in her 3-year-old baby. And she was apprehended by our border patrol in that area after 12 hours walking, because she was lost. And thank God she was found, but she was sent back immediately. So those stories really help you to see what action you should take. And that's what we did. After delivering 700 bags of food every week for about 4 months, we decided that we needed some building, that we needed something, that we needed a sanctuary, we needed a space where people can have some respite. So we got together with the community of the little town of Sasabe, Sonora in Mexico. They were excited to hear what we had to offer. They were excited to partnership with us. And we said, we are asking you for permission to be in your town. And we have to remember these border towns are pretty much dominated by organized crime. So having a center they have to do with migrants is a high risk. But they said, we're gonna take a chance. So to make a long story short, we organized and had meetings and had conversations. And after 4 months, from March to May 1st, 2021, we opened our center. And it's called Casa de la Esperanza. A beautiful place where our people who have been lost in our desert for days or for hours, they come to our center and they are provided with a hot meal, a change of clothes, shoes, a telephone call to their families, a shower, a hot shower. It is amazing the transformation, within 20 minutes it takes. When they come to our doors with their belongings and trash bags and nothing, they practically have nothing but that look. There is just a look of pain, and many of them feel that they lost their journey and they feel betrayed by their guide many times. So the transformation is beautiful and we are there to support them. So when I say that this town does not have public transportation, we have been pretty much genius in how we are going to transport our family, our women, our men, our children that said, I don't want to do this journey anymore. But remember that town is owned by organized crime. So the local ladies who actually are the backbone of this place every single day, because we are open from 9 to 8 at night, they have their friends and they call them and say, would you transfer our migrant to the next town, which is called Altar, Sonora, which is another capital of organized crime. But it is a shelter that runs in there by nuns. And we are so thankful that they are working with us. So when we send our people to their shelter, they receive them with love, they protect them, they take care of them. And we as an organization, pay for their transportation from Sasabe to a local person to the near shelter. And then we also pay their bus ticket to their country or to Chiapas, which is the southern border. So this is what taking action is. You see a need, you act on it. And we have a lot of needs in our border towns. Thank you for this space. We continue to say with our loud voice, we must end this cruelty. We must end Title 42. We must remain in Mexico. Doesn't make any sense. Our people need to knock our door and we need to open our door. Thank you so much for this space.
Thank you, Dora. That was wonderful. I just want everyone to know that Dora right now is in travel. She is in Michigan, I believe. She is doing something of a cross-country tour, a speaking tour, to try to raise awareness of everything that she has just told us everywhere she goes. So, Dora, thank you so much for your work. And I wanted to ask you, Dora, if you'd like to say a word about the CSW virtual marketplace.
Yes.
And Dora, while you're speaking, I think I can share my screen here and bring it up. So go ahead. Tell us about what this is.
Okay. So we apparently that one was I hope it's open, but if people goes on our website of salvavis.org, can find this beautiful, beautiful, embroidery work. I'm wearing one that our beautiful women and communities are doing, so that the hope that we are, that we are working this project is sort of a baby project, but in the town of Sásabe, Sonora, as I said, it's very small area and it's really nothing for local families to do or children. So because our resource center is not only for our migrants and asylum seekers, it's also for the community. We now have a group of 20 women who comes twice a week and meet as a community.
Basically, is what we know from there.
We need someone to mute. Thank you. Sorry, Dora.
That's okay. So I was just sharing that because it's a community center. We now have about 20 local women who come twice a week and do the most beautiful embroidery work. This is one example. And they also do toe bags, jackets, mantas. And what we do is we recycle the money, we bring it to the States, we sell them, and then that's how we pay them. They get paid $20 for each manta, and they are so thankful that now they not only have a revenue of some money, but they also have a community where they can talk, they can share their stories. And if a woman is in danger for domestic violence, we had already the case, women is there for them. They help each other. So this is an amazing program. And if you can visualize, our center is just 2 rooms. The front, where it's almost like a restaurant setting and a shower, and then in the back is our kitchen. So in the front, that's where our people comes in, and sometimes we have one side of local women doing embroidery, and the other side are migrants that have been just returned to Sásabe, getting some help. So it is a beautiful place. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what I want to point out, what I have shared on my screen here, is that the CSW66 is hosting a virtual artisan fair where you can actually go to these websites and purchase some of these items. And the very first one here, called the Artisan Project.
Yes, and if
I
yeah,
thought
if
that would work for me.
working, I'm sorry, if for some reason it's not working, because the woman who's managing this page just advised me that she put the link from our organization to where people can see the Artisan Project. But
here it is.
Yeah, it is there. It's beautiful. So thank you so much. And it's not only in Sásabe, but it's also in Chiapas, El Salvador, and San Marcos, Guatemala. That's where we get our products. And it's
a beautiful.
Yes.
Look at those products. Yes. So I encourage everyone on the call here to go to the CSW66 Artisan Fair and shop around.
Yes.
All right.
All right. I pass it to the next person.
Thank you very much. And the next person, so we're going to have plenty of time for discussion and Q&A. So we're just going to go from one speaker to the next, if that's all right. And our next speaker will be, hold on a second here. Okay, our next speaker is Julia Wigglebutto. Julia, I hope I've said that right. Julia is a Loretto volunteer this year, living and working in El Paso, working as a legal assistant at Diocesan Migrant and Refugee Services. This is her third postgraduate year of service. Previously, she worked in youth ministry and immersion coordination at Dolores Mission Parish in East Los Angeles, and at a college-bound after-school program called New Jersey LEAP, based in Newark, New Jersey. And both of these placements were with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. She says she is glad for the experience she has had this year, assisting immigrants with legal benefits and learning more about the immigration system. Julia, over to you.
Thank you, Sally. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Robobuso. I'm a legal assistant at DMRS. I'm in our general legal services unit, which means I mostly work with DACA renewals, as you may or may not be familiar with. Currently, initial DACAs are on pause, but we're still able to renew DACAs for those who already have that status, as well as I work with permanent residency and family petitions, as well as naturalization. Georgia and I have similar roles. Neither of us are really on the ground, I would say, in the same way as a lot of the other speakers are. But we are going to speak a bit more about the legal roadblocks that migrants face, those seeking asylum, as well as other legal protections in the US. Also preface to say, neither Georgia or I are experts on legal topics. We work with lawyers as well as accredited representatives who are those that they don't have a law degree, but they have specialized training to specifically be able to work in immigration law, because there is such a need for legal representation. And even with the ability to be an accredited representative, there's still really a lack. There's still quite a lack of enough legal representation for those on the border. While I don't specifically work with what I'm going to be speaking about here, I want to circle back to talk a little bit more about Title 42 and MPP that Dora mentioned, as well as a few other, I would call them more emergency immigrant statuses. So for Title 42, we just passed the 2-year anniversary of the status, because it was put in place right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic by the Trump administration. The CDC has now formally terminated this program for minors. There had been a temporary exception since January of last year, but now they've said minors cannot be excluded under Title 42. As Dora was mentioning, various health officials have stated that Title 42 is unnecessary at all to prevent the spread of COVID in detention facilities. Title 42 needs to be renewed every 60 days. And there's reporting that potentially the CDC might decide as soon as March 30th to end Title 42. Additionally, CBP, or Customs and Border Protection, have been given the discretion to exclude especially Ukrainian refugees from Title 42. In general, it turns out CBP actually does have discretion to be able to let certain people with various health issues and other things to be able to enter the US. But the fact that Ukrainians are specifically stated to be exempt from Title 42 shows unequal treatment based on country of origin, which is actually barred under international refugee law. In terms of MPP, or the Migrant Protection Protocol, which is about the most ironic name I could think of, otherwise known as the Remain in Mexico program. This is for those who are hoping to seek asylum in the United States, but they are prevented from actually being in the United States during the asylum proceedings. They're forced to remain in Mexico. There was never really a clear legal reasoning given. It was instated under the Trump administration back in 2019. It was briefly on halt last year for a few months, but a lower court has declared that the Biden administration did not have the legal authority to to end MPP. So back in December, it started up again. Mostly a lot of residents or nationals from countries that have strained relationships with the US fall under MPP. So that's countries like Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela. These are also countries that are not accepted in Mexico under Title 42. So it's kind of a tag team between if a migrant doesn't fit under Title 42 for exclusion in the US, they would fall under MPP most likely. Those seeking asylum are forced to find their own shelter and basic needs. There are, various border shelters, but obviously they're not able to contain everyone who is seeking asylum right now. Also under the Trump iteration of MPP, those seeking asylum were not given proper fear screening interviews. Those seeking asylum have to prove either ongoing conflict in their country or persecution, either that they've already faced or that they have a credible fear of facing based on their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Previously, migrants had to know to state that they feared returning to their country or feared being sent back to Mexico. Now they are specifically asked if they do fear a return, but there's still a large burden of proof on the immigrant to prove that fear. Many people who are in MPP are given deportation orders in absentia, which means that they didn't show up for their court date. This could be because lots of migrants have been waiting for years to be able to, have been waiting for years in MPP and had decided to leave to head back to where they had been traveling from, or they potentially had their papers stolen in those couple of years, or they were unable to be reached. Mail didn't reach them in terms of when their court dates were, when they were supposed to show back up. Those who are in MPP and asylum proceedings are supposedly able to receive representation, but few are actually able to receive it. For example, in some of the shelters in Juarez, DMRS's directors, her direct phone line was listed in the shelters, but she was gone for certain periods of time, so wasn't able to receive those calls. So that's just one example of migrants not actually being able to reach lawyers, and often, people who are in detention right at the border, time is really of the essence. DMRS also filed a FOIA, or a Freedom of Information Act, I believe last year, and the papers that we received clearly demonstrated that the program was put in place as a deterrent for asylum seekers. A little bit more about asylum in general. As I stated, you have to prove persecution or armed conflict. As was mentioned by one of the presenters on the LACC call last week, climate disasters are not grounds for being able to seek asylum. Right now, those who are in criminal proceedings are allowed legal representation, but those who are seeking asylum are not guaranteed legal representation. Also, the approval rates are tiny, especially in El Paso. Some jurisdictions in other states do have higher, but right now, or in the last few years, I believe the stats were less than, Georgia, remind me, I believe it was less than 25% were granted.
Yeah, depending on the judges, it can be less than 1%, to less than 25%, but very, very low rates.
Yes, you do have a much higher chance of an approval of your asylum with legal representation, but it's still very small. Another status that certain immigrants are able to receive is called temporary protective status, or TPS, which is, it's similar to asylum, but it's not quite as comprehensive. This is under the Department of Homeland Security. They've declared certain countries that are facing ongoing armed conflicts, such as a civil war, natural disasters like earthquakes or hurricanes, or epidemics, or extraordinary and specifically temporary conditions. So the current countries that have TPS include Myanmar, El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. Some of these countries have had temporary protective status for the last couple of decades. Some of them have only just recently received TPS or have recently been redesignated, such as Haiti. A couple countries have just received TPS designations. They're still in process. These include Afghanistan was just designated March 15th, and Ukraine was designated March 1st. TPS is still, it's really tenuous. It has to be, the government has to reinstate it every 18 months. You also have to have been in the country before the designation date. So people who are, trying to come from Ukraine or Afghanistan right now would not be able to apply under TPS. They would have to go through asylum as well and potentially be turned away. So basically, DHS recognizes that the US can't in good conscience deport people back to these countries, but neither do they want to encourage asylum seekers. There's a couple other really discretionary categories that some immigrants do fall under. One of them is known as deferred enforced departure, or DED, which is a presidential discretion that currently applies to Venezuela, Liberia, and Hong Kong, which basically just means that they residents of those nations can't be deported right now. There's also humanitarian parole, which is very discretionary, can be granted by Customs and Border Protection at the border, and it's actually what many Afghans entered under. But now they're able to apply for a TPS, which is a slightly more stable situation, but it's still not going to be a pathway to residency or citizenship the same way that asylum is.
Julia, thank you. Wow. You said that you are grateful for the opportunity to learn more about the immigration system, and you certainly have, as evidenced by your presentation to us this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, our next speaker is going to be Georgia Rawhauser-Milet. You may have to help me with that, Georgia.
Sure, it's Rawhauser-Milet.
Milet. Okay, thank you. Georgia is also a Loretto volunteer this year, also living and working in El Paso. She is working as a legal assistant at an organization called Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center, where she has been working since August. She is a recent graduate of Grinnell College with majors in political science and Spanish. And Georgia, we welcome you. And what are you going to tell us about?
Thanks, Sally. I appreciate it. Let me say a little bit more about, I'm, like you said, I'm a legal assistant at Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center. I'm here in El Paso with Julia. And I work on our CMAP team, Community Migrant Advocacy Program. And so the work that I do is mostly with people who are already present in the United States and who are not in detention right now. So this means that, similar to Julia, I help people renew their DACA status. I help with family petitions, help people get residency and naturalize as citizens. And I do a lot of work permits. So there are a lot of different categories and reasons why people can get work permits. And I do a lot of that at work, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Like Julia, I'm pretty new to this work. I've only been here since August. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be hearing from all of these panelists and learning from everyone. I want to share today two, I guess, major topics that I see as pressing humanitarian crises. And these are things that, like Julia was saying, I don't work as on the ground with migrants, but I do a lot of casework and hear a lot of stories from clients. And so I want to start off by talking about some of what's been happening in detention centers recently. And there's been a report this week about a detention center near El Paso that I want to touch on. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, which sounds really administrative, but has some really big humanitarian impacts in the way that they process cases. So I'll start by talking a little bit about detention. Generally, we see, and again, this is not, I don't work directly in detention, but I have colleagues who do, and I can share a little bit about what's been happening near El Paso. Generally, we see a lot that detaining single men is the priority, and we see fewer women and families and children, although that certainly does not mean that those folks are not being detained. And we also see a definite racial disparity where Black detainees are denied bond at higher rates. If they do have bond, it's posted at really high amounts. And then inside of detention centers, conditions are very, very poor. People often don't have access to their most basic needs like water, adequate clothing, warmth. Detention facilities are often kept really, really cold. And one detention center near El Paso called Torrance County Detention Facility, it's in New Mexico, has recently become a center of attention because immigration nonprofits have called attention to its violations of adequate conditions. And recently, actually, the DHS watchdog agency, the Office of the Inspector General, so the government's own agency, recommended that all people detained there be relocated due to unsanitary conditions and chronic understaffing. So this looks like over the facility was at some points over 54%, or sorry, only 54% staffed. So that is nowhere near the amount of staff that would be needed to keep people safe. That means that there are people who are being detained who have no access to a staff member if any kind of emergency were to emerge. Additionally, the report found that only about half of the cells had, or I guess half of the cells had plumbing issues. So that means clogs or leaks, or people having to drink out of sinks that were meant for mop buckets rather than for consumption of water. And they also found that people are routinely denied access to legal counsel, even though they do have the right to speak with a lawyer, although the government doesn't have to pay for it like a public defender. And inadequate food, inadequate hygiene, and really conditions that advocates have described as torturous. So that is a really, obviously a huge cause for concern, a huge humanitarian violation. And despite all of this, ICE has disputed these claims and said that this report, which again was issued by the government, was politically motivated, and they don't have the intention of changing. It's also important to note that this facility is owned and operated by private contractors that contract with ICE and make money through this partnership. So I'm going to make a pivot now to another topic, which is a little bit closer to the daily work that I personally do, and is a little bit more administrative, but I think also has a really huge humanitarian impact, which is talking about USCIS, or United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. I deal with USCIS a lot because they're the organization that processes work permits, but they also process a lot of other applications for different immigration status and immigration relief. To me, the two of the biggest reasons that USCIS causes a lot of harm to migrants is that applications take a really, really long time to pen, and they can be really expensive. So for example, just to apply for a work permit, and this is to apply, no guarantee that it's granted, it costs $495, and a work permit typically has to be renewed every year, 2 years, depending a little bit on the type of work permit, and you have to pay that fee continuously. For an application to become a permanent resident, it costs $1,225 just to get a certificate that proves that actually you're already a US citizen because you had a parent who was a US citizen, costs over $1,000. There are there is a fee waiver process that you can go through with USCIS, but that's going to add a lot of additional processing time to your case, and there's no guarantee that it gets approved, especially if someone doesn't have a lot of documentation or paperwork that USCIS requires. And so that's often a harder option for folks. And then speaking of long processing times, right now in Texas, just to give some examples, a work permit can take 2 to 13 months to adjudicate. And once again, some of these work permits only last a year or two. A residency application can take 24 to 45 months, or a VAWA application, which is a process through which victims of domestic violence can get immigration relief to stay in the United States and to protect themselves can take 24 to 31 months. So these processing times are really, really long. And especially for work permits, we've been seeing increasingly long processing times, which can cause people to lose their jobs if their employers are unable to wait for their work permit to come. It also means for people who don't have a work permit, they're not able to work, they're not able to support their family, which can have a lot of consequences. It can mean people can't pay rent. It can mean people can't pay medical bills or can't seek the medical help that they or their children or family need. Additionally, in the state of Texas, you cannot get a driver's license or a state ID without presenting your work permit or residency card or something of that nature. And the state ID or driver's license also expires as soon as your work permit expires, which means that if someone has a work permit that is going to need to be renewed every year, they're going to be having to go to the DMV every 2 years to renew that driver's license as well, which means that when work permits are delayed, then someone is unable to renew their driver's license, which is expired. And that ID is often the key to getting certain social services, like, for example, low-cost medical care. So when USCIS takes extraordinarily long to process this application, that means that families are going out without really necessary medical care because they don't have that documentation that would provide access to something that's such a pressing need. There's also one more factor that I think can deter folks from seeking help, which is that there has been historically a public charge rule that says that immigrants who are in need of any public assistance are ineligible or for other certain benefits or statuses down the line. And so that public charge rule was actually recently changed, which is a really positive thing, but there's still a lot of fear and stigma around seeking these services because it can kind of be used against folks later down the line. So I guess my overarching point here is that this seems very administrative and bureaucratic, which it is, but it also has really profound humanitarian impacts on the daily lives of people and the services and services that they can access and their kind of basic quality of life. So that's what I wanted to share today. Again, thank you to Sally for hosting and to all the panelists.
Georgia, thank you so much for helping me, and I'm sure others on the call, to have a better, deeper understanding of the human impacts and implications of some of these policies. It's just heartbreaking to hear you talk about how, because our bureaucracy takes too long for this, it affects that, and that means this. And thank you. That was really informative for me. Okay, our next speaker will be Josiane Mukam. And here's what I want to tell you about Josiane. She is a young Cameroonian woman, a nurse by profession, who today is a community organizer at Espacio Migrante, which is a migrant center in Tijuana, Mexico. So I asked each speaker today to send me a brief bio for me to use to introduce them. And this is what Josiane wants you to know about her. Josiane faced challenges from the sea and the jungle to finally find herself in Mexico City, and from there to Tijuana. She is devoted to her work and to helping the community. Discrimination, racism, rejection have no secrets for her. She finally used them to create armor and strengthen the weakest. Today, she is stronger than ever and walks with her head held high. She says her work is her greatest therapy, and being a migrant woman has taught her a hidden side of life that she didn't know before. Josiane, you have the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, that is the great part of me because that theater is like me. Immigration is a part of my life. It can never let me, never, 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 because I know where I'm coming from. I know by the right side I'm crossing to be there. That's what I'm saying. When somebody say something about immigration, I know because I'm stronger too much in Tapachula side here in Mexico before to arrive here in Tijuana. Um, First, I want to speak about my work before to introduce my life, my migrant, that part of the migrant life. My work is I'm here in community organizer at Espacio Migrante, but presently I am a coordinator in Espacio Migrante too. Yeah, we have found somebody or some woman, she can take that place. But now I coordinate in Espacio Migrante, the shelter, because where I'm working is the office upset. We have a shelter, the people live inside. Yeah, and like my work, my puesta, como se dice, my profession, espacio coordinator. Um, I try to have a contact with the African because I am a community organizer African. We have three. We are African coordinator community of Haiti, Haitiana. She's a colleague. Also the leader of the organizer. She's a Central American. Yes, the third. I'm African. We separate the job like that. The world we have a different point, attack different point. For my work, I have a contact with the people, especially for the migrant African or and the Haitian people. I propose my helpful Espacio Migrante by my voice. We propose the helpful firstly by the classes, the barrier de la idioma, barrera de la idioma here. That is the first problem we have here in TJ, also all the Mexican, because when the immigrant arrive in Mexico, they are not speak Spanish. They are speak maybe French, Spanish, English, or Portuguese. My first preoccupation is to accompany the people to go in these Spanish classes. We have the professor in Espacio Migrante, the professor, volunteer professor, they give the classes to the people their needs. Before the COVID started, we are making the classes in presential, here in the shelter, in the office. But now, we are more than 2 years now, we continue to give the class, but online. That's why we participate to buy the internet for the people they need to take the classes, Crises classes. Yes, we buy the internet for 1 month for somebody you need to take the class, but it's not having money. We buy him the internet to provide to help him to provide to take these classes. Yeah, that is the first big part I like to do because I'm still in the class of the Spanish classes. Yes, I'm still in the classes. I like that idioma mucho. That is Spanglish. And the second part is when I invite the people to take like a section informativa. That is the section information about the crossing border, about the new actualization for the crossing border, and also what can they help we can provide to the family. Because when we invite the people like that, when I took the number from, after that I contact the people to know how they live, and also I go to the address they are sending to me to see how the people live. I have a direct contact with the people, and also we sharing we call that in Spanish monedero. That is the credit card food. That credit card food, we have good people, good heart people. They help us to have that donation to share to the people about to give her something to eat, some good food in the house, to take care of the family and the people. The sad story about that is the African and also the Asian people have a difficult to have a house here in Chichen. When they're starting to take the house, the people consider her like a black people. We don't need to rent you the house. We don't need something like that. If some Mexican friends call to ask the house to rent it, the lawyer, the landlord is so, okay, yes, you can take house, it's okay, it's available. But when it's come accompanied by a black man or black woman, he's asking me in Spanish, who wants to live here? He said, no, I want to live here like a 2 or 1 month, but my friend can live with me. He said, no, you know, my house have a problem. I need to fix him, something like that. It changed the world. It's refused to rent the house because it's want to rent the house to help somebody to enter inside. That somebody is a black man or black woman. That is the part of my job. I fight every day. I fight every day to open my voice, to say no for the discrimination, no for injustice, no for the racism. Yes, that's why I give all my time to working like I can, to working like I can, to put the loose, ¿cómo se llama? Light, yes, to put the light for that situation. Everywhere, not in the Mexico, not only in the Mexico, but everywhere in the world. Because I said every time when somebody give me the word discrimination, racism is more dangerous like a pandemic COVID. That is, yes, we need to destroy him. I think that is the situation we need to send the missile. I don't know how the people send the missile for the people or for some country. We need the same missile, the missile to destroy that bad attitude inside the world. Discrimination, racist. Yeah, that is the part of my work. I love my work. My work is the therapy. My work is everything for me because I am a migrant woman. I know where I'm coming from. When I try to give my hand to help somebody because I know how it's feel inside. I know how his body, why situation in need to change, how the mind. That is why we have too much people have a head mental here because they are not well. People thinking too much. People need somebody who can smile, just smile with him and tell him, you can feel better tomorrow. You can feel better after. You can take that breath and eating and drink that water. You can feel better. Just that word, it changed everything. And my life story is very complicated. I left my country at 2018 because I have the military war and injustice for my personality, for my consent, because I am a nurse trainer. I try to help the people, the military shot. That moment, the military decided to arrest me, beat me, keep me more than 10 days. You cannot imagine what the kind time I've survived in my body. I don't want to say that here because it's too sad, it's too dirty. Yeah, I want to pass for that part. The military in my country do me that thing's paining, too much pain. Yeah, I'm success to run and come here by that side and crossing by Nigeria, but Nigeria, they are starting to arrest all the Cameroonian for that side. That's why at that moment, my country and Ecuador are visa free. I have a helpful. I decide to crossing by Nigeria to directly to Ecuador. At Ecuador, you can never imagine. No black, no working Ecuador. Is very stronger. When I'm starting to find a work, we say, no, the black woman, the black man will work here. What kind of job you want to do? I saw one Dominican man and his wife, she's accepted to take me, but to keep me in the kitchen, to wash the plate and clean the things. I know halfway I'm sleeping in the kitchen because I don't know nobody there of that country. That family is so nice for me. But you know what happened after 5 days? The people knows I am a black woman, I'm not a Dominican woman, but I'm working, I'm washing the plates. They are eating inside. They tell him, if you are continuing to live, that black woman is your kitchen, we cannot come here to eat in your restaurant again. You need to remove that black woman in your kitchen. The black woman cannot touch the plate and eating inside. The man said, no, she's working too hard. She's a responsible and honest woman. I don't know how you want me to remove her in the, she's working, just working. After 2 days, the restaurant started to be empty. The man cooking, but nobody come and eat the food because the black woman inside the kitchen. The man tell me, too sadly, Josiane, I need to tell you to left. I don't know how you can do, but you need to left because I need to feed my children. I need to pay my rent. I need to take care of my family. I understand, but the people is like that. I left the restaurant. I go. I started to sleep in the park on the cold. It's too complicated for me. I decided to walking to go in the Colombia. Like that, I traveled alone. I saw many people in the road. We have continued the journey together. When my money starting empty, I'm slept on the road, I'm slept on the floor like that to wait when I can continue to make my journey. I'm successful to enter the Tapachula, spend more than 8 months in Tapachula because they say if you don't have the document, you cannot continue your journey. I say, I just want to the document to crossing the border and seeking asylum in the US. They say, no, we need to be here and wait. When we decide to give you some document to crossing legally, you can give you the document. I spent more than 8 months here. That part of the country in Mexico is the worst. The worst. I'm very sorry if Mexican man or woman hear me, but it's a true because I lived there 8 months. They treat the people badly, especially black people, migrant people. They treat us badly. You don't have a work, but they tell you to spend 8 months somewhere. You don't have work. You don't know how you can eat and feed yourself. You don't have nothing in the migration, no getting you, insult you, call you, pick, call you why you decide to come in my country. If you know, happy to see how I'm treating you, I will treat you like and think. It's a bit too complicated for us. Very complicated. But by grace of God, we are received the document and received my document. I'm traveling, I'm arrived here in Chichi, and I don't have money, I don't have nothing. I'm continuing to sleep on the floor, outside in the street, Sorry, it's ready. I'm continuing to sleep outside in the street. I say, wow, I slept more than 2 weeks like that. I have many problems. The people want to wreck me at night. I have many problems here in TJ at night with the cold. That's why some night I say, wow, I'm suffering too much. I need to do something. I cannot continue to sleep like that with some woman. She don't know how powerful she have, how fighting she can fight. I need to move myself and thinking. I decide to go to Agno. That's why I'm going to Agno. I explain my situation. They say, okay, I will help you. I will do something for you. They are called here in, I don't have phone, nothing, but they give me the direction. I come here. They are come in Espacio Migante and said, we are need to send you the woman. She's very, very suffering. Can you help her? When I'm arrived here, Espacio Migante keep me like a baby. Like, it's a first time I received a really, 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 really big love. I received that kind of love I never saw like in more than 1 year, more than 2 years. They keep me like a baby, give me everything, herb, food, security. I say, what? I never see the people like that. I never saw somebody with the white color give you that kind of the love. I be like that. I say, wow, Jesus Christ, that is can arrive to me. I say, I never leave this place. When the people say you can go and walk, you can go and walk outside, I say, what? I'm coming back outside. I know what happened outside. I don't never want to live here. I want to live inside. I don't want to go outside because I know what happened outside. I propose myself like a volunteer. I live in the shelter, but I'm sorry. I propose myself like a volunteer. I starting to help here to do some work here in the office. I starting to call the African people. I speak with them. I was working like that every time. Come and clean here, come and do everything. If we have a donation to share, I propose myself to share the donation, to be there, to working out. Yes, when this COVID starts, I propose also myself to help the people they have a COVID because I am a nurse training. I go to treat the people they have a COVID because at that moment, many people they are afraid. I said, no, I want to help because many people have a COVID at that moment. Many migrants who have a COVID. I said, no, I can help the people. I can give my strength, my intelligence, my training to help the people. Yeah, I'm working at that moment. The COVID is too high. I make the caravan, we call that caravan, for the caravan medical to go shelter by shelter to take care of the migrant people in the shelter with the doctor, another nurse. I do it like that. I do it every day. I do it. I do like that. I working also in OEM hotel filter is some place here. We keep the people in quarantine like a 15 dias. Yes, before they go out in the some shelter. I do it. I'm working like that. Yeah.
Josiane, I think I'm going to ask you if you could stop there for us. Your story is so moving. We really appreciate all that you've shared with us. And perhaps during our discussion, after we hear from our other speakers, there'll be time for a little more of your story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Definitely from your heart to our hearts. Thank you.
I just want to complete something.
Yes.
Yes, I have that better because I I have the hope to bring my family, my children, three children. I'm success. My children have a resolution for the visa by the grace of God.
You know for sure they're coming?
Yes, normally my children need to come in. I need to permit the children having the visa in Africa
Yeah.
before to arrive, but I'm already have a resolution for the visa.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yes.
We will celebrate with you.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Wow. Our next speaker will be Courtney Smith. Courtney is from Connecticut. She graduated last year from Georgetown University with majors in government and psychology. And then in September, she moved to Nogales in Mexico to be a long-term volunteer at the Kino Border Initiative, a Jesuit program, which Loretto knows very well. We have partnered with Kino for quite a while. KBI is a binational organization providing humanitarian aid to migrants at the US-Mexico border. At Kino, Courtney primarily works in El Comedor, helping to prepare and serve the daily meal for hundreds of migrants. And when not with food logistics, she helps out distributing clothing and accompanying the women and children who live in the shelter. Courtney, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sally. We are having a little bit of a Wi-Fi situation here at Kino, so I've jumped on to my phone. So I apologize for the weird phone angle, but we are having some weird internet issues over here in Mexico right now. But hi, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here today. As Sally said, I'm Courtney, and I have been a long-term volunteer here at Kino since September. As Sally mentioned, Kino is a binational organization. So we work on the US and Mexico sides of the Nogales border here in Sonora and in the US in Arizona. So in addition to providing humanitarian aid, such as food, clothing, first aid, Kino also offers legal services. We partner with the Florence Project, which is an organization based in Tucson that does pro bono legal work. So they come down 5 days a week and do information sessions for the migrants and kind of help them through their process to try to seek asylum, which I will talk more about later because that has been very complicated recently because of Title 42. Kino also offers job training for adults, psychosocial supports. So we have a social worker and a psychologist here on staff. And we also run a shelter for children and women. And so I just want to kind of give some context for the area and work that Kino is doing. So Kino was originally designed to serve single men who had recently been deported from the US or were preparing to cross into the US. But as US immigration policy has shifted over the recent years, the demographic of the people that Kino serves has also shifted as well. And so currently we are primarily seeing families who are traveling to our southern border in hopes of seeking asylum. Many of these families consist of single moms and children. And so the current situation, as I see it, is largely a result of Title 42, which you all have heard a lot about. But just to reiterate, as of this past Monday, so 2 days ago, Title 42 has been in effect for 2 years. And so that means that for 2 years, people that have come to the US Mexico border seeking asylum have been denied this right. And so the right to asylum is a human right. It is protected under international human rights law. And so what the US government is currently doing is incredibly illegal. It is unethical, and it is excluding people from a process that they have a legal right to. And so as you've heard, Title 42 was instituted right after the COVID pandemic hit in 2020. The Trump administration put it into effect. And at the time, nobody really knew how long COVID was going to be going on for. We didn't really have a full picture yet of the crisis that we would all be sharing together. But as COVID has continued on for these past 2 years, unfortunately, the Biden administration has continued Title 42, which has been a huge disappointment for a lot of the humanitarian aid organizations working here at the border. We had a lot of hope when the Biden administration came into power that they would remove Title 42 as they said they would, but unfortunately they have continued to extend it. We are hopeful that there is going to be some movement on Title 42 this coming month in the next few weeks, but as it stands today, Title 42 is still in effect. So Title 42 has completely shut down the asylum process, meaning that families that would typically have a valid claim to asylum are forced to wait in towns here in Mexico along the US border, or they are forced to make the very difficult decision of trying to cross through the desert. And so I am incredibly blessed to get to work with and care for and get to know a lot of the families that come through Kino. And I just want to highlight a story of a family that came from Guerrero, which is a state within Mexico that has unfortunately kind of become a stronghold for the cartels and for the mafia here in Mexico. And so this family was a young couple and their infant daughter, and they arrived at our shelter. The husband had been a police officer in Guerrero, and the cartels tried to get him to work for them, and he said that he would not. And as a result of that, he had to flee for his life and take his family with him. And so they were here in our shelter for a couple weeks. They were working with our lawyers through the Florence Project, trying to figure out if they could get asylum, if they could get HP, if they could have a Title 42 exemption. But unfortunately, the Florence Project lawyers said that even if that were an option for them, it would take them probably at least 6 or 7 months for that process to be completed. And so instead of waiting here at the southern border, they decided to make the really difficult decision that the mom and daughter would return to a different part of Guerrero, which is still incredibly dangerous, and that the father would try to cross through the desert to make it to the US and hopefully send for his family in a couple years. So they left our shelter about 2 weeks ago, and we have not heard from the father. So our hopes and prayers are that he crossed safely into the US. But I just share that with you all because I think that the decisions that a lot of the families are forced to make are between a rock and a hard place. And unfortunately, if they don't choose to cross in the desert, which is a horrible option on its own, the other horrible option is having to stay here in towns along the southern border, which are incredibly dangerous and put migrants in a very vulnerable situation. So I just share that with you all for some context and just so you can kind of get a sense of the people that we are trying to serve at Kino and the families that are being really hurt and really impacted through these policies that the US continues to extend, such as Title 42. And so I also just want to note that Title 42 is in place and has shut down the asylum process, but the only people that are able to cross the border at the moment are unaccompanied children. So anyone 18 and under that arrives here on their own. To be an unaccompanied minor, you have to have arrived without a biological parent. So even if you arrive with an older cousin or a grandparent, you are still considered unaccompanied. And so unaccompanied minors are the only demographic that are getting to cross into the US currently, aside from people that are able to get a Title 42 exemption or a humanitarian parole case. As you heard earlier, getting a Title 42 exemption and an HP case are incredibly difficult, but we have been really lucky that these past 2 weeks at Kino, we've had 3 families that have been granted HP. And so that has been wonderful to see some of my favorite people that I have come to know and love get to cross into the US and have this journey that will hopefully be safer and will give them opportunities for just safety and health and growth. And so it has been really exciting to see that happen. But I will note that they were waiting here for, I think the family that crossed last week was waiting here for 9 months before their HP case was granted. And so, yes, they were granted HP, but they still had to wait here for almost an entire year. So just for context, as you also heard, the system is incredibly backlogged and things are not working the way that they should. And so when I think about all of this and kind of the context that I just shared and that you've heard from some of the other people share on the panel, when I think about all of this and how it uniquely impacts women and children, there are a couple of things that really jump out to me. The first is that the families that we are seeing coming to seek asylum are primarily composed of single moms and children. And so, as I said, if they do not decide to make the really treacherous and dangerous journey through the desert, and if they decide to not turn around and go back to their home, they are forced to stay here and live at the southern border, just waiting for Title 42 to be revoked and for the asylum process to be reinstated. And so these families are put in an even more vulnerable situation. So migrants that are living in border towns are incredibly vulnerable to crime, to kidnappings, to extortion, because the cartels and the mafia know that they will likely not report these crimes, that there probably aren't going to be people that are trying to help them, probably people that are not going to be checking in on them. And so this makes them incredibly vulnerable. And so especially for single moms and children, finding housing in the city can be incredibly difficult and incredibly dangerous, which is why Kino's shelter primarily serves women and children. And so many of the families that are in our shelter are here because they were victims of crimes here in the city. And so we had a family in our shelter a while back. They were here for about 3 or 4 months in the fall, which is longer than most people are staying in our shelter currently. But this was an incredible family that I love dearly. And they were actually granted HP at the beginning of January. So they are safely living in the US currently. But they were originally in our shelter because it was a single mom and her 3 kids. And they were originally in our shelter because the kids were almost kidnapped. Thankfully, the situation was avoided and they were able to get out of that situation, but they had nowhere else to go. They were not safe living in the city on their own. And so thankfully, we were able to take them into our shelter and just the most extraordinary children. But that's kind of a perfect example of why it's really important for our shelter to primarily serve women and children. And our kind of primary demographic is typically people that have been victims of crimes. And so they feel them. I'm so sorry. Someone tried to call me. Sorry. The second thing that really stands out to me is that although it is really good that unaccompanied children are able to cross into the US, obviously that is a good thing. It unfortunately does create an incentive for parents to send their children to the border alone, or for teenagers to come here on their own. And as I'm sure you all have heard previously and can assume, it is incredibly dangerous to make the journey up to the US Mexico border. It's incredibly dangerous for adults, and it's even more dangerous for children, especially young girls, teenage girls. It can be an incredibly traumatizing experience for a child to navigate on their own. And so at the moment, I'd say we're seeing about maybe 5 cases of unaccompanied children a week now. We had a 17-year-old boy arrive yesterday, just for context. We had a 10-year-old girl arrive last week. We had siblings who were 14 and 5 come last week. And so thankfully we are able to cross these children into the US, and they can have their case through CBP. But it is obviously a very difficult situation to navigate, you know, even as an adult. But in the context of a child who is alone, it is incredibly traumatizing. And so while it is good that unaccompanied children are able to cross, I think it creates a really difficult situation where parents feel that if the only way for their child to have a safer life is for them to cross on their own, that puts their child in an incredibly dangerous situation. And so the last thing that I want to note is that I think when I think about women in particular and how the humanitarian crisis here at the border uniquely affects women, I think it's really important to note that a lot of female migrants throughout their journey north experience a lot of sexual violence. And so I think that when we talk about how we support and accompany female migrants in particular, it really needs to be a holistic, trauma-informed process. And so there was a woman who came into our shelter probably about a month ago, who I accompanied into her appointment with our doctor here. She had been assaulted twice on her journey up to the southern border. She had her 5-year-old son with her, and she was really anxious that she could possibly be pregnant. She was not, thankfully, but she was really nervous that she might have an infection. She was not feeling well and had the signs of possibly having an STD. And so getting to walk with her through that process, getting to accompany her to that doctor's appointment, because she was, you know, very anxious to try to have that conversation on her own, and to be alone in a room with a doctor, understandably so. So through that situation and through accompanying her as she was, you know, processing everything that happened to her, and you know, there were a couple times where she was in a state of crisis, and so we had to call our social worker to come and work with her. But I think that it's really important to just note that the humanitarian crisis at the border affects all migrants and all communities. But I think the way that women and children are uniquely affected really requires a response. I think it requires a stronger awareness of how we can better support what resources are really required. And I think that it's really important to remember that the crisis that we're seeing now is a direct effect of US government policies. And so I leave you with that. I will encourage everyone to call your representatives and ask them to end Title 42. We had a big day of action here on Monday. Unfortunately, I am Zooming on my phone, so I can't show you some of the photos from our day on Monday, but we are encouraging everyone to take action and to call your state and federal officials and tell them that you support taking down Title 42. So I leave you all with that, and thank you for being here.
Courtney, thank you. Thank you so much. Words from a humanitarian worker. You obviously do a whole lot more than serve food at El Comedor. The accompaniment that you're providing the people there is just really heart-wrenching and so wonderful. And we're grateful to you for the work that you do. Thank you. Okay, we're going to hear from one more speaker, and then we will have what I'm sure will be a rich discussion. Our final speaker will be our good friend, Bob Key. Bob has been a member of the Tucson Samaritans, doing border and humanitarian work since December of 2005. His volunteering has him in the desert and at various locations at the Arizona-Mexico border at migrant resource centers. And until 2 years ago, when in-person visitations were suspended due to COVID, he was visiting and working with people in immigration prisons. Bob will tell us about his experiences along the Arizona-Mexico border. And he will also, I believe, give us an update from a woman who was scheduled to be one of our speakers, but at pretty much the last minute found out that she was unable to join us, Sister Judy Berg, who does her work in the Douglas Agua Prieta area. So Bob, you have the floor.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for this opportunity to share my experiences and stories from the work that I do and have done here at the border. I had to write things down because I easily get sidetracked, and I want to make sure that we have time for question and answers at the end. So I'm going to be reading through this so that I don't get sidetracked. I have a tendency to go off the rails a bit. So first, what I'd like to talk about is what is occurring now at the border, and I'll talk about what I'm doing at this moment. So I'm in Nogales usually 2 days a week, usually on Mondays and Saturdays. I'm there to work in the clinic to provide first aid for people. And Courtney did an exceptional job of describing what goes on at the Comodoro and what services are offered. And as she talked about, as of about 2 months ago, the Comodoro does have a doctor on staff, which is so wonderful, so that the migrants are getting consistent and professional care, which is fantastic. And he's such a wonderful man. As far as the Comodoro, the numbers fluctuate day to day, week to week. And I have met some of the unaccompanied minors that have come in. And it's always startling when a child comes in and I said, well, how can I help you? And are you here with your mom? And I said, well, no, I'm here by myself. I'm here alone. I met a 10-year-old girl from El Salvador. Well, of course, because of Title 42 and MPP, there are so many people that are staying in Nogales, Mexico, so that population has grown. Trying to rent houses and trying to find shelter is extremely difficult. Many families are living in Nogales and hoping for the policy change. Hopefully that does happen. And I've met families that have been in Nogales for 8-9 months, some for over a year, that's an extremely long time. Also, I try to get out to the desert at least once a week to do different types of trips, driving or hiking on trails, leaving water. And at this time, the desert is really active. It's a very active place. It has been for the last 6-8 months. So I'll just talk about just last week, for example. Last Sunday, I received a call from Courtney. She was in Aravaca, which is a small town about 12 miles from the border. And she and her group had encountered a migrant there. So she was calling to see what could be done. So I reached out to various people, and there's really little that can be done. And that's really a problem because our hands are really tied as to what we can do. We cannot transport them, which is a major crime. But so he did have my phone number, and to my surprise, he called me back that afternoon, and I said, well, where are you? And he said, well, I'm with a woman and her family. So apparently someone else had run across him in Aravaca and took him to their home. I did call back the next day. I called several times, but I was never able to get in touch with him. So I have no idea where he is. I hope he's safe. He was trying to reunite with his dad. And then on Monday, I went out to the desert with a group of folks. During that day, we had no encounters with migrants. On Tuesday, I received another phone call from a gentleman that I had met the year before. He and his wife were working on the wildlife refuge, cleaning up, and they had encountered a young woman from Guatemala. She was walking on the road, and he didn't speak Spanish, and he didn't know what to do. So I spoke with him, and she wanted to turn herself in to Border Patrol because she was lost and had been separated from her group. Then again, on Wednesday, we went back out to the desert. We were driving along the wall, and probably about 8 miles east of the town of Sasabe, which Dora spoke of, we encountered 4 minors from Guatemala, ages from 14 to 17. And they said that their journey was 10 days from Guatemala to get to the border. And I said, well, where did you cross? And they said, well, right here, because there's a gap in the wall. There were many gaps in the wall along that stretch. So they were waiting. They had been waiting since 11 o'clock that night, and Border Patrol had never driven by. They wanted to turn themselves in. So I did call Border Patrol so that they would come to pick them up. And in the meantime, I was able to connect with 3 of the families in the US. So 3 of the young men were able to speak with their families. The other young man from Guatemala, I could not get a hold of his family. I've tried. So I'm going to call back today or tomorrow to call the families to see what the situation might be with these children. The one that I'm really nervous about was the older 17-year-old. His birthday, he's going to turn 18 on Friday. And that's a very, very scary situation. Because, it's a situation where if they know his birthday, they may hang on to him until he's 18 and then put him in prison. So that's the desert portion. So as well as going to Nogales in the desert, the last several months I've been going to Douglas Agua Prieta, and I see that on this call is Sister Pat Farrick, and welcome Pat. Pat used to be in Douglas and Agua Prieta with Sister Judy and Sister Lucy, so she knows well the Migrant Resource Center there and the situation at the border. And as well, Pat would come to the prisons to do visitations often. So thank you so very much, Pat. So when I'm in Douglas Agua Prieta, I'm usually there for 4 days, working at the Migrant Resource Center, receiving migrants as they come in, and they're deported at the border 24 hours a day. Midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, and it's much colder than Tucson. I was there in January and February, and it was freezing. It was in the mid-20s, and oftentimes when people are deported, they'll only let them have 1 layer of clothing on their torsos. So people will come in with just jackets, no shirts or anything else. So we have to get them some shirts, and then we try to assist people that need medical care. And when I spoke to Sister Judy yesterday, she said the last few days, she said that the numbers have been down a bit, but things always fluctuate. So then if the numbers are down there, then I will look to Nogales to see, okay, are they deporting more people to Nogales or more people to Sasabe? So it's always great for us to be able to share this information so we know things to look for. And just a story to share about something that happened in Agua Prieta the last time I was there. It was on was Friday afternoon, late Friday morning. I was preparing to leave. I had been working with the sisters, the Mexican sisters there, and there was a group that came in, and there was a gentleman that was basically carrying his friend who could not walk. His friend, he said they were running in the desert, and he tripped and twisted his knee, and he was in excruciating pain. And when he came in, I said, you know, there's nothing I can do for him. I said, you know, we need to call the ambulance. And so they called the Red Cross. They came, assessed him, and they took him to the hospital. But the fact that Border Patrol released this gentleman, obviously he could not walk. And this is something I've seen many, many times. So the inhumanity is, it's horrendous and horrible. And I want to talk about the prisons as well. I know Georgia touched on that. And it's important for people to know. And as she said, you know, these prisons are for-profit prisons. So, you know, they're making money off of these individuals. And Dora was very instrumental in visiting prisons, as well as Pat and Sister Judy and Sister Lucy. And once people are in these prisons, it doesn't take them long, and you know, to know that these places, and what they tell me, you know, these places are negocios. They realize they're businesses, and I just can't wrap my head around that. This is how sick it is to be making money off of imprisoning people, and they are not criminals. They are not criminals. So the people in the prisons can work. How interesting, they have to apply for a job in the prison. They'll work 5-6 hours a day for $1 a day. And to put that in context, for a person from Guatemala to call their family, it costs them $1 per minute on a phone call. And so, you know, so they're in there where the food is horrible, the treatment by the guards is often bad to criminal, and medical care is poor to non-existent. And it's so wonderful. I'm still in touch with several of the women that I used to visit. Some I do, you know, messaging, and some I actually do video calls in Guatemala, and some states here in the US. And during the pandemic, I was receiving letters from women, and some actually said, "I'm afraid I'm going to die in here." It was such a horrible, horrible situation. On 2 occasions, the plumbing backed up in 2 of the pods, which you know, created even worse health issues. So I'd like to finish up sharing some personal stories, things that have of my experiences, and some of the experiences I've had with individuals. So the hardest and the most difficult experience I've had is finding human remains in the desert. It's something that brings up many different emotions. You know, you feel horrified and angry and sad, and it leaves you with this hollow, sinking feeling in your stomach that how is this even happening? You know, because there's no excuse for this. But at the same time, I'm feeling all of those things. I'm thinking, I hope these remains can be identified and families can be notified, that so they know what happened with their loved one. And a personal story about an encounter in the desert. We're out one July afternoon. Obviously, July, it was very hot. It's during the monsoon season. We were hiking in the Tumacacri Mountains, very remote area, very difficult terrain. And just not long after we left the vehicle, we had an encounter with a gentleman on the trail. We gave him food and water. And I said, you can't walk with us, but, wait 5 minutes and you can walk behind us. So we walked on, and we would stop and meet up with him, and we'd chat and several times. And then eventually we had to turn around because we needed to be out of the desert because the storms come in the early afternoon, and we didn't want to get caught in the rains. So on our way back to the vehicle, we ran into another gentleman coming down the trail. And he was just, all he had, no backpack, just a liter bottle that was about half full. And we stopped, talked with him. And one of the women that was with us, the young woman, was a volunteer from the Florence Project. And she said, look, here, take my backpack. So she gave up her backpack. We started to load it with food and water. And he says, wait. He said, someone else might need that. And my reaction was, he's a better man than I am. I don't believe I would have ever said that. Here's this guy with nothing, and he's thinking about someone else. I was in awe, and I still am. This story I'm always touched when I think of this story. So we got back to the vehicle. It started to rain, and as we were driving on, it started to hail. And our thoughts and prayers went out to these gentlemen that we had just met on the trail. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is a meeting that I had with a woman at the Comodore. She and her two children are staying at the shelter. And I had seen her, this was on a Saturday, and I was there by myself. She came into the clinic and said, can you help me? She had something minor, and she sat down. We addressed her health issues, and she just started to talk. And she was telling me about her family and her children. And, the difference between her 6-year-old son and her 10-year-old daughter. And, she described her daughter as being, very, tranquila, very calm, and the son was just the opposite. So as we were sitting there talking, I could see the tears in her eyes, and she started to talk about what was going on in her pueblo in Guerrero. And Courtney touched on this, and Guerrero is an extremely horrible place where the cartels have great power there, and there's a lot of corruption with the officials as well. And then she started to cry. The mood changed, and she started to tell me what was happening in her pueblo. She said that the cartels were going around to houses, and they were approaching families with young daughters 8 to 12 years old, and they were trying to buy their daughters. And she said that they were really preying on the indigenous families because they were much more vulnerable, more poor, and she said they would even offer them less money for their daughters, and they were looking for virgin girls. They weren't interested in teenagers. They wanted young girls. Not knowing, I have no idea what the reason was, but so she started to even cry harder. And when she calmed down, she started to tell me that they came to her house, sat down with her members of the cartels, and said, we will pay you $10,000 for your 10,000 pesos for your daughter, which is about $500. So they left, and of course she said, she told them no, And they said, well, we'll be back to see if you change your mind. Well, before they did come back, she made the decision to leave because her husband has been in the US for 2 years. And so, she's there with her 2 children, and she's had to make this decision to leave, which was not easy. But she decided, she said, I see no future here in Guerrero. And she said, and especially I see no future that is safe for me and my children. And this has happened on other occasions as well. And I truly honor that people open up and share with me like that. I mean, to make themselves so vulnerable. And so I really value the trust that people put in me to tell me these stories. So I'll end with that. I thank you so much again for this opportunity to share, let you know what's happening on the ground, and please come out and have your own experience here at the desert in the border. Thank you so much.
Bob, thank you. Thank you. You have a most wonderful, generous, compassionate heart, and thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you for allowing the stories you hear to enter your heart, and then for sharing them with us today. Wow, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, this session is advertised to end in about 5 minutes. We could go over a little bit if anyone wants to continue a discussion, but I will open it up now for comments or questions if anyone has any, and I would ask you to use the raise your hand since we have quite a few folks with us and I can't see everyone on my screen. So if anyone wants to make a comment or ask a question. We're not usually so shy. Okay, Dora, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to, again, thank you for the opportunity to share stories and what we do in different capacities. We're all important. We all matter to this puzzle of humanity. And I think we're all making a difference. And I am so thankful for that. I also would like to ask Courtney if she heard if the Title 42 that is ending to underage applies to Mexican children, because it was not before.
Yeah, that's yeah, there's been a lot of movement on Title 42 in the past couple weeks, some of it really good, some of it also not so good. But yeah, so the Title 42 kind of shift that came at the federal level is that unaccompanied minors are going to be able to cross. And I believe that it also does apply to Mexican children as well. And so like yesterday we had a young boy come who was from Michoacan, and he was able to cross. And so it does apply to Mexican children. The other change that we've seen in Title 42 that is really positive is that the U.S. government can no longer expel families to countries where they say they have a credible fear. And so that is a really good thing in the sense that, if you are from El Salvador, say, and you have a credible fear for not wanting to return to your country, the U.S. government cannot send you there. It does mean that the U.S. government can deport you here to Mexico. So it doesn't entirely solve the problem at all. And it is still a policy that is horrible, but in a small step, that was a positive step in the right direction. But yeah, Title 42 is kind of a beast of a system that we're trying to to walk through. But I do believe in the next few weeks, knock on wood, hopefully everything goes as planned. And I do believe that Title 42 is going to be lifted in a couple weeks.
Thank you, Courtney. I see that Marta Benavides has her hand raised. Marta.
Gracias for all this sharing in so many ways. I am one person that he keeps checking on these situations because I see that we are entering a very difficult time in the life of humanity because of what's happening with the planet and nature in general. And because the number of impoverished continues to increase, especially under the conditions of the pandemic. And these wars that we are seeing, they are going to be more and more because there is not real political will to figure out solutions. So I was talking with some people that have been doing a lot of the work in support of migrants and refugees and asylum seekers. And I was asking them how hard, and the work is very, very hard, and it's very hard for the people themselves. And more people need to leave our countries, especially in the area of the Northern Triangle and Mexico. Mexico is going through very, very difficult situations, and it is given a lot of pressure by the country of the North because they are in that special treaty, the NAFTA treaty, and that is used against the situations of Mexico to demand things from Mexico that create a lot of civil unrest even inside of Mexico and for the whole sub-region related to the southern part of Mexico. I was asking people, we need to find out what is being done in particularly, in general, in terms of these concerns, migrations, migrants and refugees, etc., worldwide, because this is worldwide and there is about 20 more wars going on at this time that we are watching, mostly Ukraine. But then, what are we doing to work on the causes, the root causes of these situations? Because it's going to increase and a new world order is being created that is also going to force more of this, happening very, very soon. And so people told me, we don't get involved in that. And I know that there are some people that are doing it because I belong also to the processes going on in the UN related to migrants and forced migrations and things like that. So I want to suggest that, we need to make peace with nature and we need to make peace with ourselves. And so I would suggest that we have a smaller meeting of some people that would like to figure out and discern about this, because more is coming and the solution is not in our hands now, but we are the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you very much. I do see that our time is up and I don't see any more hands raised. So I will give one more opportunity if anybody wants to speak. Rosa, I see you just turned your camera on. Maybe you want to speak?
Sally, I think we had talked about just one last announcement.
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm raising my hand for that, but I see Maureen has her hand up as well.
Oh, yes,
She
yes.
always has such insightful comments, so I'll let her go first.
I just have a short question for Julia. Julia, you mentioned the different programs that people can come here, and one of them I didn't catch the name. It was after you talked about TPS, and I thought you said maybe it was a new program that Afghanistan people were using.
The humanitarian parole.
HP. Ah.
HP. Okay, I missed that. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, it's not just for those coming from Afghanistan. Like Courtney was saying, it's a discretionary tool that could be used for people coming from various different countries. But it's not often granted. It can be really difficult to get.
Julia, you mentioned the word discretionary. which triggers in me thoughts and feelings about how discretionary the treatment is that all of our speakers today described in the stories that you all shared with us, and how sometimes it seems to me that US officials who are executing whatever our immigration policy is or isn't seem to want to use their discretion to make it as traumatic as they possibly can on the migrants and asylum seekers. Why release people across a border in the middle of the night to a place where there are no services? Why strip people of their clothing and say you can only have one layer of clothing when it's 20 degrees out? Why it has to be made so inhumane is something I just will never understand. And I thank you all for the stories you shared with us. You have demonstrated and expressed through your stories exactly what we know is going on, but we need to hear the stories from you. So thank you all very much. And you have my deepest admiration and gratitude for continuing to do the work that you do. I don't know how you continue to do it day after day, but you have our thanks. Rosa.
Thanks, Sally. No, I mean, I put in the chat, just to preface my announcement, that, you know, Bob's sharing, Dora's sharing, Josiane's sharing, Courtney, you know, Georgia, Julia, all what we hear on Immigration Spotlight. It just kind of renders us speechless, but we can't stay quiet. We have to speak up. We really do. We just have to keep telling the stories and promoting change. And I think that was part of our starting Immigration Spotlight, to bring the emerging information and situation, the changing dynamics at the border, to bring them on a continuous basis. And so it's important to continue to tell those stories and to talk about it, and to really connect with each other, and then this way support each other, but also, you know, we're able to provide others information about how to support you with the community. So I too am very, very grateful. I want to invite people to what's a reflection, a meditation that the exhibit booth organizers, Loretto and Jacor, have organized every morning at 8:30 and Eastern time, New York time, and in the afternoon, 4:30 Eastern time. So we did a sharing this morning. We're going to repeat it again at 4:30. I invite you to log on to, I think I'll just put this link in the chat. And it's going to be about 15-16 minutes. We are going to actually repeat an intervention by Marta Benavides, who spoke shortly, a little while ago, about the intersections with gender, environment, and migration, a talk that she was a part of just last week by the LACC. So we will have that short clip, her wise words, for the meditation and sharing at 4:30 today. And let me put the link here.
You're putting it in chat, yes?
I will put it in the chat, yes.
Very good, very good. Okay. There it is. Thank you, Rosa. Okay, my friends, you have our deep gratitude for joining us today. some hard to hear stories, but we need, as Rosa said, we need to keep telling them and we need to keep hearing them. And we are so very grateful to our speakers today and to all who joined us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Big hug.